On June 26, 2026, Disney Plus released their new animated horror comedy, The Doomies. The show follows the adventures of two tweens named Bobby and Romy, who come across a mysterious rune and accidentally unleash hordes of paranormal terrors that they have to fend off. I've been stoked for this show since it was announced. It looks like exactly the kind of show Disney TVA has been looking for, very much in the vein of Gravity Falls. I think this show could change everything. Not just for Disney television animation, but for Disney Plus and the entire Disney Corporation. Problem is, I literally can't review it right now. Because the scariest thing about this horror comedy is Disney's management of it.
Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
Now, I know that it can be risky for a YouTube animation reviewer to make a bold claim about a new series so soon after it comes out, because there's always the chance that they could be laughably wrong. I'm reminded of that one person who said that Haley's On It would be the next great story-driven cartoon for Disney, and then it proceeded to spin its wheels for 30 episodes before ending on a cliffhanger. Granted, those were never conclusions I would have come to about Haley's On It to begin with, but I was also under the impression that it would at least be mildly successful. But if The Doomies is a big hit, I do think it has the potential to change Disney's mindset and strategy. To recap, Disney television animation has been in a rough spot for the last several years. It almost feels like the executives deciding to cut the Owl House short kicked off some kind of curse that caused every show that came after it to be unceremoniously canceled. The Ghost and Molly McGee, which debuted in 2021, was the first one of these victims, and after that, show after show got canceled. Haley's On It? Dead after one season of spinning its wheels and an infuriating cliffhanger. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur? Ended after season 2 in spite of overwhelming critical acclaim. Primos? 1 season. Stugo? 1 season. The only show that's escaped this fate was, against all odds, Kif, a slice-of-life musical animated fantasy comedy.
How are you not dead? I have no idea!
So what happened? These kinds of shows used to be able to get 3 seasons, and shows like Wander Over Yonder were the outlier at Disney. Gravity Falls only ended after 2 seasons because Alex Hirsch had always planned it that way. Big City Greens has managed to carry over from 2018, and Phineas and Ferb is a nostalgic property at this point. I think the problem really boils down to the fact that the success of these shows was no longer dependent on cable ratings, as cable was quickly falling from relevance, and streaming was the hot new thing. The Ghost and Molly McGee debuted in late 2021, and it was the first show where its success was really dependent on those streaming numbers. And Disney seemed really confident that Molly McGee would be successful. From 2021 to 2023, it pretty much felt like it was the new flagship show of Disney Channel, as shows like Amphibia and The Owl House were ending their runs. And so when the rumors of its demise cropped up in early 2023, I brushed them off as paranoia. And then when the show aired its last episode at the beginning of 2024, and it was confirmed that the show was over, Bill Motz posted a thread on Twitter explaining what had happened. We were deep in the writing of Season 2 scripts when The Ghost and Molly McGee premiered in October 2021. The early indicators from our first drop on Disney Plus were that the show was doing quite well. So wanting to keep the production going, Disney decided to commission the writing of 10 Season 3 scripts in hopes of success. Unfortunately, without the robust marketing support we had at launch, our second drop on Disney Plus in December 21 did not perform as well. Even though our third drop improved, by early June 2022, it was decided that the show would not continue onto its Season 3. It was pencils down. If Disney Plus viewership numbers are going to be what they determine success or failure by, then Disney needs to do more to actually market the show to Disney Plus viewers. Seriously, they haven't mentioned the show on Twitter once ever, and what little promotion of the show they did do on YouTube was the laziest thing imaginable. Every episode drop for Season 2 up until December just showed various clips from the first Season 2 trailer. They finally got clips from later in Season 2 for the December drop, which was the Christmas and New Year's episode, and they used a clip from Fona, which was not the episode on that drop, and then January...
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh!
Are you f***ing kidding me? It's the show's finale, and you went back to using clips from the Season 2 launch trailer! So just unbelievably lazy. Lazy, lazy, lazy. What we didn't know was that we actually got extremely lucky with Molly McGee. Moon Girl got renewed for a second season before it debuted, and Hamster and Gretel got renewed for a second season because they weren't about to tell Dan Povenmire they were going to let Hamster and Gretel just have one season while they were ramping up to make more Phineas and Ferb. But almost every other original series after Molly McGee was just getting one season. And this includes the live-action sitcoms like Ultraviolet and Black Scorpion, Pretty Freakin' Scary, Saturdays, and Electric Bloom. Yet, remember when Disney Channel actually had tween sitcoms? They basically don't anymore. And I think it's worth mentioning that all of this started happening at the same time Gary Marsh stepped down and Io Davis took over as the head of Disney Channel. I get the vibe that Davis seems to be prioritizing existing IPs that have proven successful over original shows, even going as far as to straight up just buy the distribution rights to a popular YouTube nursery rhyme series and put it on Disney Junior and Disney Plus, when the animation looks stiffer than a How It Should Have Ended video from 2007. But I think the bigger problem is that people just aren't seeing the original shows anymore because they're watching streaming instead of linear cable. So it's more likely that they'd gravitate towards something recognizable over something new. In 2020, Disney Plus debuted a new Phineas and Ferb movie titled Candace Against the Universe. And its success on streaming, combined with the growing popularity of Phineas and Ferb on TikTok, was likely what led Disney to order the revival of Phineas and Ferb. The release strategy for the original shows has shifted around a bunch, and I've talked about this in the past with The Ghost and Molly McGee. Most recently, Phineas and Ferb's 5th season had a mixed release. It premiered on Disney Channel, followed by a 10-episode drop on Disney Plus. The remaining episodes aired weekly, hit a hiatus, and then came back with the rest of the season, and the rest dropped on streaming after that. Disney Plus also actually bothered to market it, which is important. Shows like The Ghost and Molly McGee, on the other hand, have been expected to perform like Disney Plus originals without the benefit of being marketed like Disney Plus originals. While Disney Channel continued to advertise any of their currently running animated shows to their viewers, Disney Plus was just treating these drops of new episodes of shows like additional library content instead of new episode premieres they were counting on people seeing in order for the show to be considered successful. The Doomies is the first original animated series from Disney TVA that's been marketed as a Disney Plus original. As far as I can tell, there are currently no plans for the Doomies to air on linear cable. The most we're getting is Bobby and Roby showing up in Chibiverse. And that's kind of a huge deal. Of course, it's not the first original animated series on Disney Plus, and it's actually being produced at Xylem Studios in France and not at Disney Television Animation here in the US. But most of the other animated shows for Disney Plus have been for pre-established IPs. Everything else has been shorts, distribution deals with other studios, or in the case of Win or Lose, well, Disney treats Pixar like they're an IP unto themselves. This, on the other hand, is a full-blown original series, an original IP, and if the Doomies is a big hit, it could reshape Disney Plus's entire business model. Ever since Disney Plus debuted, their primary strategy has been to drive subscriptions with big tentpole shows. These have been releases like The Mandalorian, WandaVision, and Percy Jackson. A single episode of The Mandalorian is estimated to cost around $15 million to make. These kinds of shows are basically loss leaders. It's like when you go to Costco and get the rotisserie chicken that's all the way at the back of the store. They do that because it gets you to pay for a membership and it gets you to walk all the way to the back of the store. They lose money on every single sale, but the hope is that you stay for long enough to buy other things, aka enjoy other content that doesn't cost them as much for them to produce, so that they can actually turn a profit on the cost of your membership. The problem is, Disney Plus has been relying way too much on shows like this to try to drive subscriptions, and they don't have nearly enough original content. Not only that, but their streaming shows based on their valuable IPs like Marvel and Star Wars have really cheapened those brands. I think there's definitely times where this works. WandaVision was fantastic and definitely needed to be told on the small screen. And The Mandalorian was a cool novelty when it came out. But having multiple Star Wars shows per year on Disney Plus has really made Star Wars stop feeling like an event in a way that never happened before Disney Plus, even though there was always more Star Wars material out there. And with Marvel, I think it's just made the superhero fatigue worse. What I'm getting at is that Disney Plus needs to figure out having more original content people want to watch that's not as expensive to produce. And I think original animated series should be the bread and butter of this strategy. Like I said previously, it's estimated that a 44-minute episode of The Mandalorian costs about $15 million to make. So with 8 episode seasons, that's about $120 million. The budgets for streaming shows are completely out of control. A comparable animated movie for Disney Plus on a television animation budget, like, say, Candace Against the Universe, is reported to cost just $5 million. That's a third of the budget for one episode of The Mandalorian. And each episode of a series is reported to cost around $500,000 to $1 million, depending on the show. At the high end, Disney could fund half of a 30-episode season of an original animated series for the price of one single episode of The Mandalorian. Shows like The Mandalorian and WandaVision are great as loss leaders, but having other original shows that don't actively lose you money is important too. Netflix was actually doing this right back when they started making original series, because they had a few original shows and then the rest of the platform was still library content. Obviously, Netflix is far from perfect. After all, they've killed plenty of great animated shows and pioneered the instant gratification binge watching and 10-episode seasons that are the reason we're in this mess in the first place. But I feel like the Netflix of today still manages to maintain a good variety of different types of original shows. They'll have huge event series, but then they'll do a lot of smaller things too, including animated shows. They still understand that their library needs a wide variety of different content and not just loss leaders. I know this transition has been somewhat prolonged because animation takes a long time to make, and a lot of the distribution for these shows specifically is tied up in various agreements with the cable companies, especially internationally. As I discussed in my video about Molly McGee's finale, people in Canada couldn't even watch season 2 of the show on Disney Plus until the show had finished airing on TV because of this. The show was animated in Canada by Mercury Filmworks, by the way. So why am I going into all of this instead of just reviewing the show's first episode? Well, because the whole season is already up on Disney Plus! When I realized that they were dropping all 22 episodes on Disney Plus at once, I was horrified. I've been looking forward to this show since it was announced, and now I literally can't cover it. This decision has kneecapped any plans I could have made to actually cover the show as it was coming out. I can't just review 22 episodes of this series all at once. At least not right away. Even if I was able to drop everything and crank out a long format video about the show, A, I don't want to do that, and B, that's not how YouTube works. YouTubers don't make giant retrospectives about TV shows that have just come out. And the only real exception to this is when a show has some sort of legacy reboot or continuation, like Phineas and Ferb or Wizards of Waverly Place. You know why Gravity Falls was so successful? Because the show aired weekly at most. This gave people time to actually engage with that show. Shows like Gravity Falls and The Owl House wouldn't have been nearly as successful without the water cooler effect. You need to give people time to digest the episodes, come up with fan theories, make fan art and fanfics and YouTube videos discussing your show. Imagine if Glitch Productions had just dropped all 9 episodes of The Amazing Digital Circus in one sitting. It wouldn't have been anything close to the absolute juggernaut of a series that it's been. Disney's just not thinking about how people actually watch and engage with these kinds of shows. At least not when it comes to their original animated series. And I genuinely can't wrap my head around why. When you release an original series like this, you might get a quick burst of engagement as a lot of people are able to go through and binge the show. But then within less than a week, the conversation completely dies. Disney has said that they've already asked Xylem to start pre-production on a potential second season. But that's the exact same thing I've heard with shows like The Ghost and Molly McGee and Haley's on It. So Disney refuses to give this show a weekly release schedule? Fine. Let's do it ourselves. I'm going to be watching 2 episodes per week and be making mini reviews of each episode that'll be posted on YouTube Shorts and TikTok every Thursday and Friday. The first pair of them are already out, and I'll be doing this for the next 10 weeks. And my review of the whole season will drop at the end of September. So let's give the Doomies the weekly discussion it actually deserves.